The year was 1885. The Arizona Territory stretched out under a brutal sun, baking the earth dry and dusty. In this unforgiving landscape, nestled between craggy mountains, lay Redemption. The once booming mining town now stood deserted, its buildings crumbling like forgotten dreams. Dust devils danced down the main street, swirling past empty saloons and silent smithies. The wind howled through the skeletal structures, a mournful symphony echoing the town's demise. Redemption had tasted wealth and prosperity, fueled by the gold that coursed through the veins of the nearby mountains. But the gold had run dry, leaving behind a hollow shell of its former glory. The townsfolk, once drawn by the allure of riches, had packed up and left, seeking their fortunes elsewhere. It was into this desolate landscape, under the watchful gaze of a scorching sun, that a lone rider emerged from the swirling dust on the horizon. Jake McCord rode a chestnut mare named Whiskey, her coat the color of a well-worn saddle. He sat tall in the saddle, his weathered face shaded by a Stetson, his gaze fixed on the ghost town that shimmered in the distance. Jake was a man of few words, haunted by a past he couldn't outrun. He had come to Redemption seeking something he wasn't sure he deserved, a chance to make things right. As Jake rode Whiskey down the deserted main street, the silence pressed in on him, amplifying the ghosts of his own making. He dismounted in front of what was once the town's only saloon, the sign above barely clinging to its hinges. Tying Whiskey's reins to a hitching post, he ran a hand over his stubbled jaw, his blue eyes scanning the empty street. The wind seemed to pick up, whistling through the gaps in the buildings, carrying with it the faintest of whispers. Just as he turned to face the source of the sound, a figure emerged from the saloon's darkened doorway. The figure drifted closer, materializing from the shadows like a wisp of smoke. He squinted, his eyes struggling to adjust to the dim light filtering through the saloon's dusty windows. As the figure stepped into a sliver of sunlight, its form became clearer, revealing the spectral image of a woman. Her dress, once vibrant, was now tattered and faded, clinging to her ethereal form like cobwebs. Her face, though partially obscured by the shadows, held a look of profound sadness.
You've come at last, McCord. I've been waiting for you. Who are you, and what do you want from me? I am Emily Wilson, and I need your help, McCord. My daughter Sarah disappeared in these mines years ago. I cannot find peace until she is found.
He stared at the ghostly apparition before him, his mind struggling to make sense of what he was seeing and hearing. He had come to Redemption, seeking redemption for his own sins, but it seemed fate had other plans for him. He had seen his fair share of death in his lifetime, but nothing could have prepared him for this.
Please, Mr. McCord. They say you were once a man of the law, that you have a good heart buried beneath that rough exterior. Help me find my Sarah. Bring her back to me.
Her spectral hand hovered over her heart, the gesture as real and heart-wrenching as if she was still flesh and blood. What makes you think I can help? The mines are dangerous, and your daughter, she's been gone for years. What makes you think she's even...
The mines. They hold secrets, Mr. McCord. Dark secrets. I can feel it. Sarah, she's trapped down there. I can feel her presence, but I can't reach her. Please, you're my only hope.
He found himself nodding slowly, his gut telling him this was a path fraught with danger and despair. He had a bad feeling about this, a sense of foreboding that settled over him like a shroud. But something in Emily's plea, in the raw grief that emanated from her spectral form, tugged at his heartstrings. He knew what it was like to be haunted by the past, to carry the weight of guilt and regret. And in that moment, he made a decision that would change his life forever. He had given his word, and in a town ruled by ghosts and shadows, sometimes a promise was all you had left.
Thank you, Mr. McCord, she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. Thank you.
Her form began to fade, dissolving into the shadows as quickly as she had appeared, leaving Jake alone in the silence of the ghost town. The wind whipped through the deserted street, carrying with it the faintest hint of Emily's voice.
The mines, they hold the answers you seek.
The words seemed to echo in Jake's ears, a promise and a warning all at once. He untied Whiskey's reins from the leaning hitching post and swung into the saddle. As he turned the mare towards the looming silhouette of the mountains, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was riding towards something far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The ghost town of redemption held its secrets close, but Jake was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Jake rode Whiskey towards the mountains, their imposing shadows stretching towards him like grasping claws. The air grew noticeably cooler as he approached the entrance to the main mine, a gaping maw in the mountainside that seemed to swallow the sunlight. Dismounting, he tied Whiskey's reins to a gnarled tree, its branches skeletal against the darkening sky. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a kerosene lantern, its flame flickering to life against the encroaching darkness. The air inside the mine shaft was heavy with the smell of damp earth and something else, a metallic tang that made his nostrils twitch. Jake took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He had spent his fair share of time in dark, dangerous places, but there was something about this mine that set his teeth on edge. As he ventured deeper into the mine, the air grew thick with dust, swirling motes dancing in the beam of his lantern. He kept his hand on the butt of his pistol, his senses on high alert. He didn't know what he was expecting to find in the depths of the abandoned mine, but he knew it wouldn't be pleasant. Hours seemed to melt away as Jake followed the labyrinthine tunnels, the air growing colder and more oppressive with each step. Just as he was about to admit defeat and turn back, he noticed something glimmering in the lantern light. It was a small silver locket, half hidden beneath a pile of rubble. He brushed away the dust and picked it up, his heart pounding in his chest. The locket was cold to the touch, its surface tarnished with age. It sprang open with a click, revealing a faded photograph of a young woman with kind eyes and a shy smile. On the back, scratched into the metal, were the initials S.W., Sarah Wilson. He was certain of it. The locket was a tangible link to the ghost he had encountered, a reminder of the human life that had been lost in the darkness. He tucked the locket into his pocket, a surge of determination washing over him. Cautiously, Jake approached the source of the glint, his hand hovering over his pistol. As he drew closer, he realized it was a strong box, half buried in the rubble. To his surprise, it swung open with a groan, revealing a stack of leather-bound ledgers and a small pouch. The pages crackled as he opened it, revealing faded ink and meticulous handwriting. It wasn't just a record of gold production and expenses. It was a chronicle of something far more sinister. Next to each name was a chilling entry: payment received. It was in something far more precious, something that made his blood run cold. This ledger was proof of something dark and terrible, a secret that someone had gone to great lengths to hide. Jake rode Whiskey back to town, his mind racing with questions. The ledger burned in his saddlebag, a tangible reminder of the darkness he had uncovered. He dismounted in front of the mayor's office. The mayor looked up from his desk, a startled expression on his face.
Jake, what brings you here at this late hour?
You could say that, Jake growled, tossing the ledger on the mayor's desk. One look at the fear that flickered across the mayor's face told him everything he needed to know. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered. You can't hide from the truth any longer. The name hung in the air between them, heavy as a hangman's noose. The Order of the Black Rock. Jake had heard whispers of it, rumors whispered in hushed tones around campfires. Now, staring into the mayor's panicked eyes, he knew the truth was far more sinister. His hand shook so violently that whiskey sloshed over the rim of the glass.
All right, Jake, he whispered, his voice hoarse. You're right, I know about the order, but I swear I never wanted any part of it.
Jake pressed, his voice dangerously low. He had come to redemption seeking peace, but found more violence, more corruption. Johnson slumped back in his chair, his face ashen. It started small, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. They promised us prosperity, you see. Fools that we were, we believed them. But this was something else entirely. A darkness that had poisoned the very heart of redemption.
The offerings weren't enough. The Order, they grew more demanding. They wanted more than just trinkets and gold. They wanted sacrifices.
Johnson continued, his voice trembling. He shuddered, his eyes filled with a horror that chilled Jake to the bone.
What choice did I have? They threatened my family.
He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs.
God forgive me, Jake. I did what I had to do.
Jake stared at the broken man before him, his anger warring with understanding. He had walked into something far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. A cold dread crept down Jake's spine.
Tell me everything.
He took a shaky breath, his eyes meeting Jake's. The truth was out, and there was no putting it back in its box. It was time to bring their reign of terror to an end. The Order had operated in the shadows for too long, Jake said, his voice steel.
And they'll do anything to keep their precious mine producing. Innocent souls, pure of heart, they're the only offerings that truly satisfy its hunger.
He looked at Johnson, his expression hardening with resolve.
For the soul of redemption itself.
Jake knew he couldn't face the Order alone. He needed help, men and women with courage to stand against the darkness. His first stop was the sheriff's office. Sheriff Jenkins listened intently as Jake laid out the truth. When Jake finished, the sheriff set down his glass.
I'll be damned. This is worse than I could have imagined.
Jake said, his voice urgent.
We need to act fast. The Order is planning another sacrifice. We need to stop them before it's too late.
Jenkins nodded, his jaw set in a grim line. Jake and Jenkins moved through the town like shadows. They went door to door, sharing the truth, igniting a spark of rebellion. They gathered in the darkened saloon, a ragtag band of misfits united by a common enemy.
You're going after them?
It wasn't a question, but a declaration. Jake turned, his hand instinctively reaching for the butt of his pistol before he realized who it was. Jake, Emily, we didn't expect to see you here.
You're going to stop them. You're going to end this madness, this desecration of everything that was good and pure in this town.
We're going to try, but it's dangerous, ma'am. These men, they're ruthless. They won't hesitate to kill anyone who stands in their way.
I'm not afraid. Not anymore. Not while my daughter's soul remains captive to their darkness. You have the ledger. You know what they've done, what they're planning to do again. You can't let them get away with it.
Jake met her gaze, his own resolve hardening. He had come to redemption seeking redemption for his own sins, but it seemed fate had other plans for him. He was going to face his demons, but not the ones he had expected. He was going to fight for this town, for its people, for the memory of a young woman he had never met, but whose spirit had touched his soul. Jake, we won't. I promise you, Emily. We'll stop them, and we'll bring your daughter home. Emily nodded, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. She reached out a spectral hand towards Jake, her touch sending a shiver down his spine.
May God be with you all. Then, as quickly as she had appeared, she vanished, fading back into the shadows, leaving behind the faint scent of lavender and the echo of a mother's love.
The air grew heavy with anticipation as the group made their way to the mine entrance. The mouth of the mine yawned before them, a black void swallowing the light. Jake felt the weight of their gaze, hope and fear etched into their features.
You sure about this, McCord? These mines are treacherous, even without crazed cultists.
He checked his pistol, the metal cold against his palm. Every minute wasted brought the Order closer to their dark sacrament. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. With a shared nod, they slipped into the darkness, footsteps echoing softly. They moved cautiously through the labyrinthine tunnels, their boots crunching on the rocky floor. Jake led the way, his senses on high alert, his hand hovering near his pistol. He could hear the faint sound of chanting echoing from the depths of the mine. The closer they got, the louder the chanting became until it filled the air around them.
They're close.
Sheriff Jenkins whispered, his voice tight with tension. He motioned for the others to extinguish their lanterns, plunging them into near darkness. In the center of the cavern, a group of hooded figures stood around a makeshift altar. Bound and gagged on the altar lay a young woman, her eyes wide with terror. In his hand, he held a ceremonial dagger, its blade glinting in the lantern light.
It is time. Time to offer a sacrifice worthy of its power.
Jake's grip tightened on his pistol. He took a deep breath, and with a whispered prayer on his lips, he stepped out of the shadows, his pistol drawn. Not tonight. Not while I still draw breath. The order's chanting ceased abruptly as Jake stepped into the lantern light. The hooded figures turned, their bodies tense with fear and fury. "This ends now," Jake said, his voice cold and steady. He leveled his pistol at the figure.
Release the girl and step away from the altar. You're outnumbered, and this town has had enough of your darkness.
The air crackled with tension as both sides prepared for a confrontation. The first shot rang out, deafening in the confined space of the cavern. Deputy Marcus fired a warning shot, the bullet ricocheting off the cavern wall. The battle for redemption had begun. Chaos erupted as the Order's members surged forward. Jake returned fire, his pistol bucking in his hand. He took cover behind a crumbling stone pillar, scanning for targets. Sheriff Jenkins provided cover, his booming voice echoing through the cavern.
Hold your fire, wait for a clear shot.
He aimed carefully, each shot finding its mark. Deputy Marcus emptied his pistol into the oncoming horde. Rachel took aim from behind an overturned minecart, her rifle barking in defiance. Even old Tom joined the fray, his trusty shotgun roaring. Jake ducked behind a pillar as a pickaxe slammed into the stone. He rolled, coming up firing, his bullet catching a hooded figure in the chest. The air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the coppery tang of blood. Despite their superior numbers, Jake's group made little headway. The hooded figures fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness. It was as if they were possessed, driven by a force that transcended pain and fear.
We can't stop them. They're too strong.
He fired his pistol blindly into the oncoming horde. Jake realized the young deputy was right. Bullets seemed to pass through the hooded figures. They were puppets, enslaved by a power far older and more sinister. The lead figure's eyes burned with an unholy light as he raised his dagger over Sarah. The air crackled with dark energy, chilling Jake to the bone. He knew bullets wouldn't be enough. They were dealing with something beyond the physical world.
Jake, we need to end this now. What do we do?
Jake's hand went to the locket in his pocket. Emily's words echoed in his ears. "The mine. It holds the answers you seek." He knew time was running out. He had to trust his gut. "Keep them occupied," he yelled. He just ran, heading towards a narrow passage. He trusted Emily's words. The mine held the answers. Jake plunged into the narrow passage, his heart pounding in his chest. His boots kicked up dust, the air thick with damp earth and something ancient. Echoes of battle raged behind him, a constant reminder of the stakes. The tunnel twisted deeper, the air colder and more oppressive. Lantern light revealed ancient carvings, cryptic symbols lost to time. He felt the weight of the mountain, a manifestation of ancient evil. Stumbling over loose rocks, he narrowly avoided a gaping chasm. Driven by hope and Emily's locket, he pushed on. He emerged into a vast cavern, its air thick with strange energy. In the center stood a massive crystal, pulsing with an eerie light. This was the heart of the mine, the source of gold and Sarah's prison. As Jake approached the crystal, drawn to it by an unseen force, a figure materialized in the ethereal light. It was Emily, her spectral form shimmering faintly.
You found it, the heart of the darkness.
Jake stood before the glowing crystal, his voice hushed with awe and apprehension. But Emily stopped him with a gentle touch.
Be careful, Jake. This crystal, it's an amplifier.
Emily turned towards him, her eyes filled with a profound sadness.
My daughter, Sarah, her life force. It's trapped within the crystal.
Jake's heart sank. As Jake grappled with the weight of his decision, a low growl echoed through the cavern. The air grew heavy with a palpable sense of dread. He turned towards the sound, hand reaching for his pistol. A figure emerged from the shadows, shifting like smoke. It was vaguely humanoid, with elongated limbs and razor-sharp claws. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence. This was something ancient and evil. Jake. What is that? Jake's voice was barely audible.
This is the Dweller Below, the entity the Order worships. It feeds on life force, on despair.
The Dweller Below rose to its full height, eyes fixed on Jake. It opened its maw, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Dweller Below, you interfered. You sought to disrupt the ritual. Jake, you're due? Jake's voice was laced with disgust and anger. He had faced his own demons, but this was something else. This was evil incarnate. Jake, you've taken enough. It ends now. The Dweller Below let out a deafening roar. Dweller Below, foolish mortal, you have no power here. This world, this town, it belongs to me. He took a step towards Jake, claws scraping the floor. Jake knew he couldn't defeat this creature with bullets. This was a battle for the soul of redemption. He had to find the strength within himself to face the darkness. Jake drew a deep breath, the air thick with the stench of decay and the dweller below's malevolent presence. Fear threatened to consume him, but he clung to the image of Sarah. This wasn't just about him. It was about redemption. As the dweller below lunged, a sudden clarity washed over Jake. He raised the locket, its silver surface catching the light from the pulsing crystal. "Jake, you want a sacrifice? Fine, take mine." With a swift, decisive movement, Jake hurled the locket towards the heart of the crystal formation. Then, with a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar, the crystal shattered. The air, once thick with dread, now felt lighter, cleaner. Jake pushed himself to his feet, his body aching, his vision still swimming. The cavern was filled with dust and debris, the remnants of the shattered crystal shimmering faintly. Amidst the rubble stood Sarah, her eyes wide with confusion and relief. Standing before Sarah, bathed in an ethereal light, was Emily. As Jake watched, tears streaming down his face, Emily's form began to fade, dissolving into motes of light. The light faded, and silence descended upon the cavern, filled with peace and tranquility.